Hello again, everyone. Today I'm going to be doing another travel palette swatch video. Today's travel palette is the Schmincke Whiskey Palette, and this is the whiskey palette that has a little water reservoir and also holds water that you can put in the reservoir. I'm going to show you that when I open that up. And as per usual, I am going to put a link to my video where I go through this traveler's notebook, which contains everything that I need to swatch these travel palettes. I am going to take the notebook out of here that I'm going to swatch with and put that aside, and then I'm going to open that up, and I need to get my paint brush, and I am using this little Miller's Pseudo Sable in a size 4 for the swatching. And then I'm going to put this notebook aside. You won't be seeing this again today. All right, so I've already pre-stamped these pages for swatches. As you can see, I have pre-stamped pretty much every page in here, so you're going to be seeing ahead a little bit today. So today I'm going to be doing this Schmincke Whiskey Palette, but next time I'm going to be doing another whiskey palette that is just the regular size whiskey palette. So there is a little bit of difference, but you'll see that when I post that other one. So let's go ahead and get into this palette before I start swatching. So it has this little cup here, which is the water reservoir, and then it has this thing here. It's basically a flat part of this area that all holds water down here. I don't actually know how much water it fits in there from a measurement standpoint, but it fills this guy about twice. So, you know, you dirty your water and then you toss it out and then you can fill it one more time. And that little guy, get this out, fits along the side here. It doesn't really snap, it just kind of loosely holds on, so you kind of have to be careful not to flick it off while you're using your brush. I'm not actually going to be using this reservoir today just because I do have a full cup of water off of camera here. So, but it is handy if you're actually traveling with it. I'm just going to put this to the side when we are swatching. So in here I have the original palette of Schmincke watercolors. So when this came as a set with watercolors already in it, and when it only came with these 2 rows over here, and they're all Schmincke paints, and then I added some extra ones here in the middle. So it can hold, I think this is 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, yeah, 12. So this holds 12 at maximum capacity. It only comes with 8 when you buy it. So here is the little swatch sheet that I made with the swatch sheet that it comes with, but we're going to get a little more in depth. And these swatches were actually not too great. I don't know if it was the paper or I was using too much water or what it was, but we'll go through all these when I do the swatching. So I'm also going to put that aside, put that out of frame there. So before we begin, I am going to wet these a little bit so that we can get them going right away. So what I've been doing is just dipping into the water and then with the brush just dabbing a little bit of water from the brush onto each color. You can also spray these with a little mister. They come with they don't come with. You can get a travel mister that will just spray really easily. You can also just use a regular spray bottle. You could use a little dropper to put water on there. I'm not putting a whole lot of water on each, although these 2 might need a little more. Oh, uh-oh. Let's see, that's the danger of these super pigmented paints. I'm actually going to dab that off there so that we don't get that red, and then put a little bit more water on there, because you'll see pretty much as soon as you put the water on there, it starts to soften the paint really, really quickly. So let's go ahead and put this to the side here. I think I'm probably going to move this over here on this side for when I'm swatching. All right, and it's going to be these down here. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see a little better. I'm going to keep that in the frame as much as possible. I will do my best to remember to move this up so you can see this area once we do that. Although I think I can probably, yeah, I'll keep it there. So once I've swatched the colors, and I'll tell you what they are as I'm swatching them, I will do this little color chart here. And I've already picked colors out, but we'll talk about that when I get to that this time. So as I said, this is a pre-made palette. Here, if I keep that there, you can see it. But I may need to move it while I'm doing it because I don't want to contort myself. As I said, these 8 colors come with this pre-made palette. And again, I got this palette from Jackson's, and I found that that is the best price. It is in the UK, that store is, and so it can sometimes take a little while to get your orders, especially these days. I'm still waiting on 2 orders actually that have been, one's been pending for quite a while and one not as long, but still, it's been a little while. So this first color here is lemon yellow, and lemon yellow is one, I'm going to move this here because that's going to be a lot easier for me to paint here. So the lemon yellow is one that I use a lot in my own personal travel palette that I have curated. It makes really great greens, and it is also kind of nice on its own to be just a very bright, vivid yellow, assuming you like that. If you don't, this would not be the yellow for you, because it is a very nice, bright yellow. And I will link to the previous videos in this series, but if you remember, or if you haven't seen those, I am putting the paint full strength up here at the top and then gradually adding a little bit of water here, and then adding more water again here and here so that you can see the diluted versions of this color. And once this all dries, it'll be a really great reference for me to go back and check on that as to how many colors I can get out of these colors. So the next one is yellow ochre. And yellow ochre is not a color that I use very much in my palettes, although I wonder if I should. I'm just not as familiar with it generally, and I'm just not as comfortable with it in my palette as some other colors. So, but it's definitely one of those colors that's sort of a standard for palettes in general. Okay. And you may notice that I still don't have a wedding ring on, so I do think that, again, marriage is fine. You don't need to worry. I think I really am allergic to something in my wedding ring, and I suspect it may be nickel. So what I've done is I have purchased a silicone ring just to try it out and see. It was super duper cheap, but basically I miss having a wedding ring because it's, you know, it's sort of a symbol, and I like having it on. So I ordered that, and then I figure at some point I will pick a slightly more expensive anti-allergenic or hypoallergenic ring. Okay, this one is Cad Red Light that I am swatching now. Cad Reds tend to be very opaque, and this one is no exception. And it seems like most, if not all, of the pre-arranged palettes by Schmincke include Cad Red Light, which is kind of interesting to me because I suppose they're putting it in the palette as what they would consider their warm red, because the next one here is Permanent Carmine. That's which one I'm putting down now, and this would be considered a cool red. So there is this concept that even though there's 3 primaries, you should have a warm and a cool of each of the primaries, because that will allow you the most range when you're mixing colors. And in practice, I've definitely found that to be true. You have a lot more wiggle room and ability to make more colors with a warm and a cool primary. Now, of course, I also have a lot of convenience colors in a lot of my palettes, and I have a convenience color just means it's either something that you could mix with the primaries, but you have that color pre-mixed, usually in a tube though. I'm not pre-mixing them myself. Or it could just be something like a single pigment green that you like, even though technically you might be able to mix the color in a single pigment green, you might not want to. Okay, so these next 4 are colors that I have added. So none of these are Schmincke brand. These are, so I have a Daniel Smith Lunar Blue. That's what this one is. And really I added this one here because I wanted to play around with Lunar Blue a little bit more. I really love the color, but I don't have a lot of experience painting with it. It seems, just by the color of it, it seems a little bit like a Payne's Gray, or a bluish Payne's Gray, or almost like an indigo, but indigo is much deeper and darker, so really you could use it in place of a Payne's Gray, I think. Or you could just use it as a blue and mix it as a blue. I was looking to see if I had picked this as my blue for the triad over here, and I did not. So I just kind of picked those on the fly and thought, ooh, what would make an interesting combination? All right, so this next color is Rembrandt Payne's Gray. So this one is similar. So Rembrandt, though, their Payne's Gray is really dark in its mass tone. Mass tone just means the color at its most concentrated. So for example, if you had a tube of watercolors and you were to just dip your paintbrush in the tube and then paint with that without a lot of water, that would give you the mass tone. With pans, it's sometimes a little more difficult to get a mass tone, but I mean, as long as you wet your colors ahead of time, or you make sure you build up the pigment layer so that it is truly as dark as it could be, that will give you a good sense. And this Lunar Blue is really super nice and granulating, which I also like. You can really see that on this paper. And I've talked about this a little bit in the prior videos in this series, but the paper that I'm using is a watercolor paper that was made into this insert by a vendor that sells on Etsy. The previous one that I was using was from Traveler's Company, the watercolor insert, and that was just atrocious. I did not like it at all, and this is working. This one, which is the watercolor paper, is working so much better and is really showing off things like granulation, which is what made me think of that and talk to you about that right now. And the colors just go down so much smoother, and it really is a good representation of the colors. I kind of now lament the fact that I had done so many color charts in the Traveler's Company watercolor paper, because it really is not a good paper for watercolor. Somebody was telling me that their sketch paper is actually better for watercolor, but I have not tried it yet, so if I do, I'll let you know. This one was Winsor Newton Sap Green, or Permanent Sap Green. Oh, sorry, I did it again. I was not paying attention, so let me lift that up there. So that's Permanent Sap Green. I have recently noticed that, because I've been working in a palette currently that has Winsor Newton and Daniel Smith mixed together, different colors from each brand. The Daniel Smith and the Winsor Newton just really do not play well together. They almost resist each other, and it's hard for them to mix together. It's not true of all colors, and I'm kind of hoping now that I've developed this before I realize that this Permanent Sap Green might not be one of those colors, but if it is and it becomes a problem, I might end up taking the Winsor Newton color out, because, yeah, it's very strange, because when you try to mix them together, I really discovered this with a burnt sienna, which this is a Rembrandt burnt sienna that I'm swatching now, by the way. I had the Winsor Newton burnt sienna in my palette, and then I was trying to make a Payne's Gray by mixing that burnt sienna with ultramarine blue, which is a very common way to make a Payne's Gray-like color. And it just was not having it. Like, the two colors just clashed and pushed against each other, and I really could not mix them very well. And that's usually not the case, especially with Daniel Smith. They mix very well. And then I am currently taking a class by Jane Blundell, who is a fantastic watercolorist. I'm taking an online class from her. And she was saying that that is something that she has noticed in her practice, that the Winsor Newton and the Daniel Smith colors do not mix well together. And she didn't really know why, and I obviously don't know why. But it's just something, I suspect it's probably some additive that Winsor Newton uses that doesn't play well with whatever additives are in Daniel Smith, which are very few. They do not have a lot of additives in their paint. It's highly pigmented. Okay, so this one is Ultramarine Finest, and we're going back to Schmincke. The last 4 colors in this row here are Schmincke colors that originally came in this set. Like I was saying, this one, and these 2 are the ones that did not come with the set originally. And you may notice that sometimes I will water down the color for these little boxes down below, and sometimes I won't. And the reason for that really is I just want to get a little bit of variation in the 2 tones if I can. Sometimes I'm not always successful with that. But if I can get that without rinsing my brush or adding too much water, I'll just do that. This is a Prussian Blue by Schmincke. And I think even if you just had the colors that came in this set and didn't add anything, it would be a pretty good starter set because you do have a warm and a cool of each of the primaries, which in theory you could mix just about any color. I think yellow ochre is kind of acting as your warm yellow in this set. It's usually categorized as an earth color, but here they're kind of using it as a warm. So you have a cool and a warm yellow, you have a warm and a cool red, and then you have a warm and a cool blue. Those 6 would be your 2, a warm and a cool of each of the 3 primaries, and then these are obviously extra. And then you have some what you could call convenience colors here at the end. There's a permanent olive, which is what this is. This is a darker green. This is one that I think Schmincke puts in a lot of their sets as well. And this is a nice color because it's kind of natural for greenery. You could use it on its own, or you could lighten it up by adding a little bit of yellow, or you could add some blue and make it sort of a tealy color. There's a lot of things you can do with a green on your palette. But as you can see, it's pretty dark and pigmented. Okay. And then the next one, which is a sepia brown, also by Schmincke, obviously. This is essentially the only true earth color that they have in here, but sepia brown is a mix of a variety of colors. But you could use it to darken colors. You could use it to, I suppose you could probably get to sort of a gray by mixing it with ultramarine blue. I have never been the hugest fan of sepia. I prefer single pigment darker colors, and sepia is almost always a mix. Sepia would be really good if you were sketching and you just wanted to add a light wash of something, or if you were painting buildings. This might be a nice way to shade your buildings, depending on the color of your buildings, obviously. I'm having a little bit too much water here. I'm going to dab off my brush before I do this last box. And figuring out the right mix of water to pigment is, it's a journey. It's something that you do learn with practice, and I am still learning, so I don't always get the ratio right. Okay, I was just trying to even out that sepia a little bit. So now we're going to go on to the mixing palette here, or the triad of primaries. So for the blue, I'm going to be using the Prussian blue. So this is a pretty standard primary, I should say, before I start. Prussian blue for the blue, permanent carmine for the red, and then lemon yellow for the yellow. So I'm going to start with the red, which I chose the permanent carmine. So I'm going to go ahead and get that. Put that in the red circle here. Okay, I'm going to put the excess that I have and actually add a little bit more. Let me move that around so you can see that. Here in the little mixing area. I'm going to rinse off my brush. And then I am going to go to the yellow. I always like to make sure my brush is really, really clean with this lemon yellow because it really shows if you have something else on your brush still. So that's going to go here, this lemon yellow. And like I said, I do use lemon yellow in my regular travel palette, and what I have started to do is put I'm going to put the excess here. And what I've been doing is putting 2 half pans of lemon yellow in my palette so that one I can use to mix with blues, so if it gets a little messy with the green, when it turns into a green, basically one of my yellows almost always looks like a green, it doesn't look too bad. So so that's nice. All right, so what I'm going to do is I am going to now mix the yellow and the red 1 to 1. So I think I'm going to do that sort of up here. And actually, let's just go with that because that looks like it's probably a true 1 to 1 right there, an orange. I'm always a little messy with my mixing, so it might not always make sense to you how I'm doing it, but believe me, it does make a little bit of sense. To me, anyway. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this puddle half and half, and I'm going to add a little bit more yellow. I'm going to pick up that yellow and add it here to this half. And that is going to be, actually that probably needs a little bit more. I'm going to add that to my mostly yellow mix. And then I'm going to add a little bit of red to the other half, and actually I think I can probably just mix it to all of this now. And then that is going to go into the mostly red mix here. Okay. So that was just looking a little too red for me. Okay. And so now I'm going to use the blue, which is the Prussian blue. I want to make sure I find where that is, right here. Oops. And I'm just getting this straight from the palette, but you could also make a little puddle of this beforehand. So I'm going to start with mixing. Okay, so since I have mostly red here, I'm just going to wipe off the parts that I mixed with the yellow so that I just have a red. So I'm going to mix it with the red first. So I'm going to mix this much that I have in here of the blue. Let me add a little more water to my pan because it looks like it was drying out just a little bit. I'll move that down so you can see. Okay. And because that blue is so strong, you are going to get a very strong blue-leaning purple, even though you're mixing 1 to 1. So I'm going to put that purple here. This is going to be my middle value purple. Okay. And I'm going to rinse my brush. Then I'm going to go back into the red, which is this permanent carmine here. And I'm going to add a little bit of red to half of the puddle. And that's going to be my reddish purple here, which is more red than blue. And then on the other half, I am going to add more blue. Again, making sure I get the right blue. And then this is going to be the bluish purple. And then we have one last one, and then the neutral in the middle. I'm going to wipe that one out. I'm actually going to wipe this one out as well, so that I get a little water on my napkin. So we have a fresh palette area there. Okay, so since we're starting from scratch, I'm just going to get some yellow here. Mix the yellow here. And sometimes color gets kind of stuck in your brush, so if you move it around like that, you can get it out. I don't want to start with too much because these are just small little swatches here. Although, you know, because we have that middle one, I am going to add a little bit more. So yellow, and then I'm going to mix roughly the same amount of blue. And we have this beautiful green here. Because this is a very traditional triad, you're going to get really vivid greens and really vivid purples. Or more traditional greens, traditional purples. You could also look at it that way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to one side of this to make a yellowish green here. And then I'm going to add a little bit more blue to this side and make this a bluish green. And I can always adjust if I think the tone is not quite right, but these I think are pretty good. So now I'm going to leave that puddle in there. So the neutral in the middle, we're doing 1 to 1 to 1. So I'm going to add a little bit of red to this, and we'll see where we get. Okay, so that's looking a little red because I'm trying to make it so that it doesn't really look like any of these colors. And I think that might be it there. That's almost a true black. Almost. So I'm going to put that in the middle. And in this Jane Blundell class, I actually learned an amazing trick to mix black, which I think I'm going to share on the channel at a later time. I'm not going to share it right now. But the long and short of it is, don't add too much water, which I've probably already done here, and add more blue than you think when you have, if you want to mix 3 primaries and make a black. I did not actually think it could be done until I was able to do it in that class. So I was really pleased at the results with that. Okay, so I just cleaned out the top of the palette there. I usually leave the palette open a little while so that the colors can dry out before I seal it up, because sometimes these are pretty airtight. And that's it. That's today's swatching. And you can see these swatches are much better than the one that I already had in the case here, and a much truer representation. But that's going to end up going back in the case, and then this little cap's going to go on the end there. Move that down so you can see it. All right, so that's it for today. I will see you again next time. Feel free to like and or subscribe, and have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.